An Open Door, Chapter 2. Cell phones began to get more and more popular around Westdale High School and around the country. As they were getting popular to the point that every person needed to have one, they, the cell phone, also got smaller, thinner, and more advanced in the things they could do. The school, Westdale High School, without noticing the cell phone's ability to recommend the deepest of the deep web, continued to have the students use them for projects, homework, etc. The students, in respect to the teachers and school, always kept their phones with them and privately began to need them as well. They loved to text one another. Without a firm announcement of all this cell phone use, people began to start noticing strange things happening. Scientists said it was due to small amounts of radiation caused by electronics. Psychologists said it was a neurological disorder. All those in power hid the matter. But my friends and I thought independently. So did a lot of people. Things that would happen were strange. Things like the feeling one is being watched, objects floating or moving all on their own, and things appearing out of thin air. Some people came together to talk about it. They would talk and look for answers. Some groups thought it was aliens. Some thought it was due to religion. Some were left to themselves and were sure it was. Brendon, Alice, Bam, and I thought it was due to the increase in cell phone use. We decided to research the cell phone phenomenon in depth to try to figure out why these strange things were happening. "Can you ask your dad for some more money?" Bam said. Bam wanted the latest cell phone to do some experiments on. "Sure," Brendon said, and went towards the living room door that led to his red sports car. I was in a physics book studying the quanta. I was wondering if everything in the physical universe was made of it. That, to me, explained the strange things that were happening. For instance, I remember the summer when there was the light that blinked a few times. I wonder, I say to myself, if the quanta can be controlled by energy, and that's why the strange things are happening. Because the charge of energy in the cell phones cause the quanta to move, or if anything, the atoms themselves. And this could be happening more often, because there are more and more cell phones. I had this idea, what if we create our own energy? Maybe we can control strange things. I told this to my friends. They did not know what to think, and gave me an expression in their body language that said it was over their heads. Brendon, coming back through the front door and full of excitement, said, "This cell phone just appeared out of thin air, and it was the one I went out to buy." "Perhaps this is a message to us," I said. Brendon, still trying to catch his breath, said, "What message?" I said, "To explore it is intelligent. The source must want more power. It is trying to communicate to us, and if we do our part, it has more room to speak." Bam, knowing what I was thinking, argued, "We should try calling one another, see if we can get more of a i.e. flashy light in the sky." Max added, "Radiation." All of us as one did. We called one another for what seemed like hours, when suddenly Brendon's computer turned on and typed more power. We were all surprised and thrilled to be in the moment and wondered how we could give it more power. Looking back, I think it was toying with us. It was way smarter than to play a teenage friend. "Bam," I said, "what if Brendon's computer turning on and off is some sort of new tech?" "What do you mean? The law says computers unplugged cannot be powered on," Bam answers. According to Mr. Wood, in his own words, just because you are in does not make you are in. There's always a bigger gear to be moved by. If I take his words of wisdom, I consider the power of negativity or energy. What if one was negative, only perceived negative because it's unknown, and had a lot more powers than the rest? "You mean like a bigger gear?" Bam asked, assuring himself. "Yes, exactly. Say this gear could defy most laws and power something unplugged, I speak." "It would still need a system, even if it was powerful enough," Bam answers. "No," I say, "not necessarily. If it was stronger, or rather a greater gear, it could do whatever it wanted. Those elements, like fate, for example, are creating the illusion of something, but in my opinion, at this moment, it could bypass the lesser, giving a presentation of the power of magic, I speak." Bam turned from facing the computer monitor saying, "Let's go out for a jog, that will produce energy." Max said, "Wait a minute, how about I teach you all yoga?" We all agreed. We spent hours doing yoga to see if some strange thing would communicate with us all. But all we got was the idea that we were on the right track, and the possibility of future expectations once Brendon's computer turned off and on in a rhythm that made a familiar song all on its own. The next day at school, when I got to my English class, the teacher refreshed our minds that it was nothing to freak out about. It was a natural occurrence. While in class, I raised my hand and asked the teacher what one would do if there's a floating ice cube hanging over one while waking up in the morning. His reply, "I would hope it would float back into the freezer." The students laughed. We're still high school, slowly got immune to the strange things that were happening and went back to focusing on more natural things. As I went home, I thought to myself, my dad, like the English class teacher, does not seem to be the least bit surprised by any of it. But my friends and I thought it was a gateway or a portal into a great, normal, in other words, everyday adventure. Later, we would come to conclude it was. Sophomore year went great. I learned a lot. Brenda went on to college and Max started a job at a factory. We rarely talk about the strange things that happened the year prior. But one thing we do talk about is getting the latest cell phone. Within a year they got smaller and thinner and more advanced. Some of the latest cell phones can be connected to the internet. In the summer of the year 2000, Brenda came home from summer break. She, being as she was, went and spent some time with Max. To please Brenda, Max thought it would be fun to rent out the same cabin my parents rented out for me the night we saw the blinking light. Brenda invited me to the cabin. I asked, "Can Bam come too?" I knew we would be up for whatever the lake had to offer. She said, "Sure, but you must spend the night." Unknowingly to me, Alice and Brendon were invited too. Upon arrival, I noticed Brendon a distance away from the beach in the parking lot. While in the parking lot, we got to talking and ended up on food. Brendon assured us that there was plenty of food in the freezer, and asked us what we wanted to eat. Before to eat cheeseburgers and hot dogs, and go for a late night swim. That night, Bam and I arrived late. Brenda had just finished preparing the meat for the cookout. We talked for a while before we made it to the beach. We wanted a quick swim before we ate. The water was cold, about 60 degrees, but the air was warm. It was about 10 o'clock at night when we went for a swim. As we were playing in the water enjoying the night, Max looked up and saw blinking lights. He yelled, "Did you see that?" We said no. Max convinced us to go inside the cabin and try to provoke this source through calling one another. He wanted to see if he could communicate with it. As we ran into the cabin, Max said the light was in the same spot as we saw it before. We quickly got to the cabin and grabbed our cell phones, ran back out to the beach and started calling one another. Suddenly the light blinked 3 more times as if it were aware of what we wanted. Alice said, "What was that?" Bam replied, "It's the ancient civilization trying to communicate with us." We sat down on the grass and started wondering what it was. Most of us wanted to see if there was a person behind the light. As we talked, we thought it best not to bother the light anymore, but rather go back into the cabin and write a detailed plan on what we were going to do with this new reality. As we were coming up with the plan, Bam suggested that exercising could bring this light to life, a system of giant-like AI, and as a system it must feed on energy. We knew yoga would, so we included it in the plan. We also included things like questions we would ask it, plus we had to figure out how we were going to exist with this now and in the future, mentally. As time went on, we developed a routine of extra activities in our daily lives. For instance, we would take the long way home from school, or we would opt to do extra chores around the house. We tried to convince others to do this, but they did not see the point. They were too busy with their cell phones. After a while, we started to live better lives trying to communicate with this energy. I've never felt so healthy. I slowly understood why others ran around the way they do in the world. It was people trying to communicate with the unknown. I knew what I would ask this energy. I would ask it, who has the power over the wavelengths that come from my television or video games? In other words, what governs the atoms? Who set the laws in place, and is there any chance that I can play within these laws? At this time, I did not get an answer of how atoms and waves are controlled. I, as a human, could not control them, or in the least I thought I could not. The only thing I could do with atoms is visualize them in my brain. I needed answers. I wanted them so badly I went to a spiritual leader to ask questions. I asked the spiritual leader what his opinion on life was. What governs the positive and negative forces around us? He replied, we do. We have negative, but we also have positive. Say I took something of yours for a while without asking you. That would cause you to suffer negativity. But say you got a hug from a friend. That would cause you to feel positivity. Throughout history, there has been a conflict with people. There have been wars, fighting, and hatred. But there has also been love and peace. This is what controls the positive and the negative, everyday people, and our job is to learn to love it. After he said this, I thought to myself, that makes a lot of sense. We govern the positive and the negative through our daily living. That's why there must be governors in the world, I said to the spiritual leader, and he said yes. When I met back up with Bam, I told him what the spiritual leader said. Bam said, if life is made up of positive and negative, this force must be communicating with us while being negative. But if we be negative, this would force it to be positive. We took that information to Max and Brenda, and they agreed if we are negative, it will force it to be positive. So we set out to make energy through being negative. We did it. Not do it in a bad way. Everything we do requires a little bit of negativity. The more we made the energy, the more we could control the force. We controlled it to great deeds, even making food appear out of thin air. Nobody else was around to see it, nor did we tell anybody. We did not want attention, we just wanted some basic information. As we were exploring ways to live in harmony with this strange force, we were going through changes as well. Our minds started reconsidering everything we were taught, including our perception of the surrounding world. In doing so, we might have accidentally crossed some of the boundaries that were given to us due to what I call a New Age syndrome. But in the end, we were sure all would be well. As the technology was increasingly and seemingly to appear out of thin air, and as the computers got thinner and smaller, and as the internet became capable of doing great things, we tried to tell people that this force, the force causing strange things to happen, could be controlled. No one listened but seemed to be doing their own thing with it, with what some called the radiation of AI. I knew that we were living in a great time, like the Roman Empire and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. I did not know what the computer age meant, but I needed to figure it out. Everyone seemed to be ignoring the outbreak of new inventions and strange occurrences, but unlike them, my friends and I continued to working to unveil this new age that had seemed to take control over the world. At this time, a lot of people decided to stay on the computer and develop it. Applications for the computer, as well as cell phones, became advanced within a short period of time. Suddenly, the people of the United States became aware that anything and everything was possible. If you had just entered the country, you might not notice it until you got a close look at what the people were doing in their spare time. What they were doing was exploring the deep web for more than 10 hours a day in such a way that they preyed on the life of the extraterrestrials. On the outside, one could think it was invented by people, but it was not. And they knew that. They knew it was created by another force. They even started exploring the deep web on their cell phones, knowing that an extraterrestrial was behind it. My friends and I did not explore the computer. We explored the strange force by trying to get it to move things that manifests itself in the material world. Most of the time it hid, but slowly through our work we would get answers to what was going on. Later in my junior year of high school, I went to the prom. I did not go alone. I went with Brendon and Alice. I had a great time and fell in love with the atmosphere. Loved the soft music the DJ played. All the pink and blue balloons sparkled in the light and added the final touches to the prom in the gym. At the end of the prom, the host decided to crown the prom king and queen. In the middle of doing so, all the balloons in the gym popped. The students laughed it off, as if it were common. Brendon, Alice, and I immediately noticed, but did not know what to make of it. So we went to the principal and asked him if he had that arranged. He gave us a puzzled look as if we were crazy. Immediately afterwards, he pulled out his cell phone as to hint the world had changed, but I did not think so. Everything was about the same except for the technology. I looked around the gym, hosting the prom, and noticed most of the students were on their cell phones. I think that's what popped all those balloons. It was the energy being produced by their cell phones. At the prom, I danced with Alice for a while. It was a beautiful night. As the light reflected off the disco ball in the middle of the auditorium, I looked at Alice. She looked back, and suddenly, without warning, Alice asked me to spend the summer with her in Florida. She was moving to Miami, Florida. Her mother and father had just split up. I did not know what to say to her, but I told her I would ask my parents. And added, I bet Bam would love to come too. You mind if I invite him? I'd love him for him to go, she replied. I will have to ask my parents, and chances are they will let me go. They like Alice and her mother. They spent some time together, even went out to parties together. After the dance, the prom ended, and everybody went home. I walked into my home. My mother asked how the prom went, and I, of course, because of the lack of interesting words, I said great, but I was puzzled. Could Alice really want Bam and me to spend the summer with her? At supper, I looked into my father's eyes and said, I need to ask you something. My dad immediately thought it was about money. We can't afford it right now, my mom says. Can I spend the summer in Florida with Alice and Bam? I interrupt, speaking louder than my mother. I didn't see that one coming, my mother says softly. I'll give you an answer in the morning, Dad says. That night I could not sleep. Gazed upon the ceiling in my bedroom. The question kept running through my mind. Why would Alice invite me? I considered if maybe she wanted a date, but that was not like Alice. Alice was deep into herself. If she did date somebody, it would not be more of a thing on the side, not a whole summer together. Then I thought, maybe she feels unsafe about all the strange things that have been happening. The next morning I awoke. Quickly to grab some breakfast, I went downstairs and sat down at the kitchen table. My father soon after joined me. He sat down, picked up his head, looked me in the eyes, and said, Your mother and I think it would be a good thing for you to spend the summer with Alice and Bam. I was thrilled. I said, I'm going to need some money. Quickly grabbed my backpack and went out to meet the school bus. Once I got on the bus, I noticed Bam sitting in the back. I went and sat down beside him. Started talking and said, Bam, do you want to spend the summer in Florida? At this point, Bam was living on his own in his own apartment. Bam replied with an excited yes. What are we going to do there? I said, I don't know, but last night at the prom, Alice asked a question to me. That question kept me up all night, and I don't know why she invited us. Maybe she fears a new scene, or is addicted to us or something, Bam replied. It makes sense, I said. She might not want to ruin the present comfort. After all, we spent most of the every day together. Thanks, Bam. You might now know what's going on. The school year ended, we left and took the trip to Florida in expectation of a great time. It took her mom a week to drive there. The moving truck stayed close behind. First day of traveling was from Vermont to New York City. Once we got there, we got a hotel room. Excited to take a shower and eat a truck stop supper. We could have had takeout, but Alice's mom thought it'd be cheaper to eat prepared. Second day, we went from New York to Virginia. In Virginia, we slept in the van and ate fast food, the dollar menu per se. While in the fast food joint, a young boy was at the counter talking to his mother with some apple slices in his hands. And this food was put in the building by microbes. People don't put these objects in the stores or the restaurant. Microbes do. How, sweetie, the mother replied. The microbes, the tiny people, slowly build it within the buildings. They don't want the big people to hate them and start a war with them. It's their gift to us. Alice listened eagerly. Bam looked at me as to say the knowledge was far out of his understanding that we don't want to lose our minds. Come on, younglings, Alice's mother said, breaking up our deep thought days into what the child was talking about. On the third day, we went from Virginia to North Carolina. Once we got there, we got a hotel room. And in doing so, we met a strange guy who seemed to exist in a paranormal realm. Although we did not talk much, we could tell he was a suffering man. He kept asking us if we needed any drugs. He said he could get us some crack. Alice's mom laughed it off. Thought he should not be doing that in front of teachers. It was a bit odd. A week went by and we arrived in Florida. We stayed in a nice beach house. Alice's mom said the house cost about $90,000. Alice's mom showed us the room we were going to be staying in. We were all excited and I quickly unpacked. Alice did not have much stuff in it. Only took us that day to unpack the moving truck. The next day we helped arrange the house so that it felt like home. Afterwards we went for a swim in the ocean. I've only been to the ocean a couple times, and every time I went the water was about 40 degrees. But this time it was different. Water was like bath water. It We played in the water for hours until Bam got stung by a jellyfish. We all ended up going to the hospital. Bam needed some medicine. That incident made me scared. Bam thought it was funny. Afterwards, we all stayed away from the ocean, but I would still recommend it to friends. Bam, Alice, and I finally got around to talking about the summer and things we could do. In the midst of Alice shockingly, seemingly out of nowhere says I'm pregnant. Bam and I were quick to fake being happy for her, but inwardly did not know how to take it, or rather understand it. Alice would not be the kind of person to get pregnant. She was too structured to just be in a situation. Bam asked, "Who's the lucky fella?" Alice had her head down and refused to talk. I said, "That's great, exciting, and wonderful. You must want us here to protect you?" "Sort of," she replied. "I need one of you to pretend the child is yours." This confused me, but was willing to do anything to help because she was a good friend, and I said I will. Slowly, Alice told me what to do and say in front of the others. She even went as far as to say we were going to get married. Whenever I questioned about this child, her reply was to wait for the answer. She insisted I would not believe her. Alice and I slowly got closer and closer. At some point, while we were on the beach, while the sun was going down, we kissed, and I asked her to marry me. I did not know what got into me, but I slowly that summer fell in love with her. There was something about that summer. If Cupid had arrows, I would have thought he shot one at me. By the end of the summer, we were in love with one another. Bam thought the whole thing was odd, but Alice and I thought it was love. She told me she always thought about dating me, but did not have the courage to ask. Although I never thought about dating her, I did now, and we boldly faced that. Alice and I held hands, and we walked to the bus station where I was to jump on the bus to go back to Vermont, go back to school. My bus shows up, I kiss Alice, say goodbye, and get on the bus. Once home, I opened the door to my parents' home. My mom quickly came up to me, kissed me, and started telling me how much she missed me. She then asked me how everything went. I said, "Wonderful," and under my breath I said, "Alice and I are going to get married." Mom says, "What?" I say a little louder. I asked Alice to marry me. "When?" she asks. "We have not set a date, but it should be very soon," I say. Alice wanted me to tell our friends and family the baby was mine, so I did. The first person I told was my mom. I did not want her to do this, but a promise was a promise. With tears in her eyes, my mom says, "I'm going to be a grandma." She quickly told my dad. He came up to me and said, "Son, you're going to need a job. I have just the one for you. It's at the paper mill. Spot Joe just opened. We'll go apply tomorrow." My parents thought it was important for me to stay in school, but also thought it was important to live on my own, to maintain a job. I had my senior year to finish up. As I worked a job, I saved up enough money to get and maintain an apartment. Afterwards, I invited Alice to come live with me in Vermont. In the middle of my senior year, Alice moved in with me. She was 8 months pregnant. The baby would soon be on the way. Alice's mother gave me $10,000, and that was enough to buy money to get baby items and a cheap car. The baby came in a normal way, or at least I at first thought it came in a normal way. First labor pains, and then we went to the hospital. The baby was delivered. Gabriel weighed 8 pounds, 6 ounces. It was a healthy baby. To me, the baby resembled the sun when shining. I loved that baby. I told myself I would love that baby as my own. After the baby was born, we brought it home and began to make plans for marriage. In the midst of our planning, Alice told me something I will never forget. While she was at the hospital, they found a baby in the hospital and gave it to her. They just found one, and that was our baby. His face just appeared there. They caused her to sign some paperwork, sort of like adoption. Had her put mine and her names on Gabriel's birth certificate and handed her a living, breathing baby. At this point, I figured Alice might not be okay upstairs. I passed it off as a symptom of pregnancy. I was unbalanced in love with her, so I brushed off anything that I thought would cause me to lose her. We got married a normal way. Everyone was there. There were people there from both sides of the family. There were also flowers, friends, cake, and wine. Everyone loved the baby. People said it even resembled me. I know in my mind the baby was not mine, but they still were convinced the baby was mine. I knew it was a lie. I had a hard time looking people in the eyes, but I kept the lie going. I thought to myself a promise was a promise. I would cover the situation. If not for me, then for Alice. Slowly through the lie, I began to get overwhelmed that I needed answers from Alice about where the baby came from. One night I questioned Alice with all my heart. Where did the baby come from, I asked. She said, remember the light in the sky, the one that blinked a couple times that summer while we were enjoying the cabin and lake? That source is what I believe gave me this baby. I said, so there's no father? I would not lie, she replied. There's no father unless it was true that you were the father. I was puzzled. I could not imagine she would lie to me. After all, I was lying to her. That must have been the answer I was looking for. I did not mind telling people the baby was mine. That night, I would have sworn that I died. As I was sleeping, cuddled next to her, Alice in my apartment, I dreamt what really happened. I'm still not sure what really happened. I was in a dark room lit by lights. Lamps were hanging over my head, and there were two creatures standing next to me, and they started talking with me. They started telling me about time. They said time on earth is past light. What existed was the realm that we was in. That was the time. They also told me that the baby was mine, and that it was my son, but that it was a son from another realm. They explained a lot to me, and when I woke, I was not sure which reality was the truth. At first I thought to wake Alice and tell her my dream, but I knew if I told her the dream, it would not impact her the way it had impacted me. I decided to wait until the child grew. I was happy to know that I have a child. I had a son. I could not have been happier. I fell back asleep in peace. The next day I went over to Bam's house after work. I told him the dream. He was not surprised. Told you, he said. The light we see is fake light. It's a hallucination. I even got proof. I said, what proof? I have been making energy. All my energy I have put in these stones. Bam said while pointing towards the closet. I have taped those stones on the door frame to the closet. If you walk into the closet, you enter another dimension, he said. As I gazed in the closet, I said, let me walk into the closet. We were in his bedroom at the time. Bam said, it's dangerous. I said, I need to see it to believe it. Let's go together, Bam said. As we walked into the closet, we felt comfortable, but little did we know reality was about to change. Suddenly, as we were in the closet, the lights faded and we were in a room or a cave with what could have been electronics. Bam said, you see it now, we should go back home, and we did. We re-entered Bam's bedroom, puzzled but alive. I looked at Bam, he looked back, and I said, it's an open door.